Good morning, Year 10. I hope you're well and having a lovely day. For your do now, I'd like you to write down 3 quotations from Long Distance 2 from memory. For at least one of these quotations, do a quotation explosion to explore language and structure devices. Could you please write the date and the title, I Wouldn't Thank You for a Valentine by Liz Lockhead. For this lesson, you'll need a printout of the poem that you can annotate, a pencil for first thoughts and ideas, and different coloured pens or highlighters. So, I wouldn't thank you for a Valentine. What can we work out from the title? What do we associate with the words Valentine? What do you think about Valentine's Day? And what kind of tone are we expecting from a poem with this title? Pause the video for a couple of minutes to jot down your ideas. So St. Valentine's Day, as I'm sure you know, is an annual festival to celebrate romantic love, friendship and admiration. However, as I'm sure you're also aware, there is a great focus on the romantic aspect of love. You might be someone who loves seeing the shops full of balloons, flowers and chocolates, or maybe you think it's all a cliche and people should express love on any day in any way they choose. So what about tone? If they aren't thanking them, do they not like Valentine's Day or not like this person, so don't want a Valentine from them? Suggest perhaps something bitter or cynical. I wouldn't thank you for a Valentine. First reading. I wouldn't thank you for a Valentine. I won't wake up early wondering if the postman's been. Should 10 red padded satin hearts arrive with sticky, sickly, saccharine sentiments in very vulgar verses, I wouldn't wonder if you meant them. 24 anonymous interflora roses? I'd not bother to swither over who sent them. I wouldn't thank you for a Valentine. Scrawl swag across the envelope. I'll just say, some old story. I can't be bothered deciphering it. I'm up to here with them all. The whole Valentine's Day thing is trivial and commercial. A cue for unleashing cliches and candy heart motifs to which I am personally not partial. Take more than singing telegrams or pints of Chanel 5 or sweets to get me ordering oysters or ironing my black satin sheets. I wouldn't thank you for a Valentine. If you sent me a solitaire and promises solemn, took out an ad in the Guardian personal column, say something very soppy, such as, who loves your poo? I tell you, I do, Fuzzy Bear, that's who. You'd entirely fail to charm me. In fact, I detest it. I wouldn't be 18 again for anything. I'm glad I'm past it. I wouldn't thank you for a Valentine. If you'd sent me a single orchid or a pair of Janet Reggers in a heart-shaped box and declared your love eternal, I'd say I'd not be caught dead in them. They were politically suspect, and I'd rather something thermal. If you hired a plane and blazed our love in a banner across the skies, if you bought me something flimsy in a flatteringly wrong size, if you sent me a postcard with 3 X's and told me how you felt, I wouldn't thank you. I'd melt. Give yourself time to read over this poem a couple of times, getting to grips with its content. It's okay not to understand every word or idea, you're just trying to get a feel for it. What's the mood of the poem? Who's speaking? Who are they speaking to? And how do they feel? Pause the video for a couple of moments to jot down your initial ideas. Okay, so the speaker seems very anti-Valentine's Day throughout, listing all the cliched things she wouldn't thank her lover for. However, at the final line, we realise that her feelings might not be that simple. If her lover were to use the day to express genuine feelings, she would melt, a much more positive tone, as it suggests being overcome with emotion. It implies she doesn't want the material gifts, but she does want the declaration of love. So now that you understand the speaker's situation and the tone, read through it again and write in your own annotations. What can you pick out about how those feelings are presented, and what devices does Lockhead use to convey her feelings? On the second reading, don't forget to comment on form and structure as well as language. Also consider, is there a regular rhyme scheme and meter? What are the topics of each stanza? And consider the punctuation choices. pause the video for about 10 minutes to make your own annotations now. So this time I'm going to take you through the poem, mentioning key details you could annotate. On the third reading, you can add to your copy of the poem in pen, confirming your own pencil ideas and adding more to it as well. Lockhead borrows from the metaphysical poets' use of conceits, the increasingly elaborate and metaphorical declarations of sentiment. The repetition of token rejection refrain imply an unwavering dynamic of insistence and growing irritation, where eventually one side will break, as if it were observational comedy building to a punchline. The final lines add to confusion. Is it just the final postcard which would make her melt? Or do we take it from the start of the sentence at the midpoint of the stanza? If you. This brings ambiguity to the message, and perhaps suggests that one can be cynical about Valentines until one is a recipient. Maybe that we're all entitled to change our minds. Okay, so we've got the repeated phrases of I wouldn't thank you, to show her distaste at all the various material cliched gifts. Of course, until the end when she apparently seems to change her mind, but we'll discuss that later on. So we've got sticky, sickly, saccharine. So saccharine means sweet. But we've got sibilance, alliteration with the letter S, to emphasise the sickly sweet idea. So more alliteration here, not sibilance though, just regular alliteration of very vulgar verses. And it creates the effect that the speaker is almost spitting out the vitriol of feeling about this. So she clearly feels very passionate in her disgust. So I'm not sure about you, but at this point of the poem, I am 100% with her in terms of almost despising these sickly sweet presents, these disgusting, overly romantic shows of affection. Or perhaps you disagree. Personally, I dislike romance in this kind of form. However, if you're a very romantic person, maybe you would strongly disagree with her at this point. Personally, I'm 100% with Lockhead in this first stanza. So into Flora. It's a well-known florist company who deliver flowers all over the country. Swither, a made-up word, a combination of swoon and wither. So again, she's sort of rejecting the stereotypical female response to romantic gestures, flat out denying it, almost to the point of inverting these stereotypical norms of female behaviour. And so swark is sealed the loving kiss. And we've got hints of a Glaswegian accent here. So this is interesting. Consider, why is she giving us hints of her Glaswegian accent? Personally, I think it's because she wants to make it clear that she's not just any old girl who swoons over romantic gestures. She wants to link this sentiment clearly with her own identity, and part of her identity is being Glaswegian. So I think it makes it more powerful and more striking that she has these examples of dialect in the poem. So we've got Amore, Italian for love, also associated with the famous song That's Amore. So I'm not sure if you've seen the advert. There was definitely an advert, maybe it was before your time, when I think it was advertising pizza or a car, one of the two, and it kept repeating That's Amore. So, or maybe bolognese sauce, it doesn't matter. So she's sick of it, she's not interested, and it's kind of hinting at, the fact that it's everywhere, it's overdone, it's overblown, it's annoying her. So the whole Valentine's Day thing, she uses capitals to draw attention to the commercialization of this thing. So it's not personal anymore, it's not specific, it's people subscribing to the commercialization, this big event, created by companies, built around objects and materialism. It's lost its personal feel. So this could indicate also a practice speech, suggests long-held feelings. So singing telegrams, this is a dated idea. Paying, which is where you're paying to send someone to a door to sing to someone. Not generally done more nowadays. Nowadays, if there was any sort of singing, it would probably be through a GIF or a meme that you send to someone. So no singing telegrams now that I know of. So Chanel 5 is a famous perfume. And oysters are aphrodisiacs. Black sheets add to this with connotations of sex. So she's saying all these, generic commercial ways of expressing romantic love. Um, she doesn't think they're sexy. She doesn't think they're romantic. She thinks they're generic and sickly and unappealing. Personally, I agree with her entirely there. So if you sent me a solitaire, this is a type of diamond cut associated with engagement rings. So again, a dated reference, taking out an ad in the Guardian personal column. People used to put announcements for special occasions in the paper. It's a bit like using social media to wish someone a happy birthday, even when you live with them. It's making sure everyone else sees how you care about them too. So ridiculous nicknames. She's mocking the way people in love might treat each other. So Fozzie Bear, the kind of silly nickname that she does not approve of. So 18, the concept of young love being susceptible to these cliches. Potentially she's seeking an older, mature kind of romance. I'm not entirely sure I agree with this though, because I almost think that young people are more likely to turn their noses up at this kind of romance. So bearing in mind this is quite dated, maybe 10, 20 years ago, young people were more kind of cliche. However, my thoughts are, and feel free to correct me, that young people nowadays would be utterly appalled at the thought of soppy gestures like sending someone a dozen roses, or I don't know, even sending them like a singing gif or gif, I don't know how you pronounce it, on WhatsApp. I think young people would be appalled at that kind of thing and find it even more sickly sweet than other people. I think it would probably be older people who would be more likely to think that kind of thing is romantic. So definitely in your reflection, do let me know what you think on this. So, Janet Riggers, I think I pronounced that wrong. I had to look it up. Janet Riggers is a lingerie brand. So politically suspect, it suggests a feminist viewpoint here. She's a woman who doesn't want to be seen as a sex object. So she sees sending lingerie to her as almost objectifying her. And again, this is a really interesting point to consider, because some would argue that it's just providing someone with something that they might want as well. But she's seeing it as a sexist gesture. So that's interesting as well, something to think about. So now we get to the really, I would argue, controversial, or at least debatable section of the poem. So the last 4 lines, all declarations of love, desire to please, all seen in this final list. And it builds to this reveal. She would melt, be overcome with emotion, swoon, sign, etc. So this is really, really interesting, because in my mind, some of these things in the last 4 lines, they're very similar to things mentioned in the poem before that. So hiring a plane to blaze the love in a banner across the skies, that seems a bit like the overdone gestures mentioned earlier, like taking an ad in the Guardian personal column. Similarly, the next line, buying something flimsy. So flimsy things kind of indicate lingerie, or at least maybe like a skimpy dress in a flatteringly wrong size. So I don't get, she was so politically offended by the Janet Riggers lingerie, but now she's saying buying her something in the wrong size, something flimsy, i.e. lingerie, is something that would make her melt. So it seems a bit contradictory to me. I sort of do get the penultimate line. If you sent me a postcard with 3 X's or 3 kisses and told me how you felt, that's a bit more personal than some of the other things she took issue with. But the fact that there's semicolons only semicolons separating the last four lines indicates that it's all connected. However, like I said, it does seem a little bit contradictory. It would make more sense if it was only the final rhyming couplet, which was where we had that shift in perspective, but then that doesn't really seem to make sense syntactically, so in terms of the way it's structured. So potentially one way to make sense of it is the melt could be seen as a bad thing. Again, it's quite a stretch in terms of interpretation, because melt normally means like, swooning, your cold exterior is melting because you're so happy. But the only way I can make sense of it is that she's melting with embarrassment. So yeah, that's how I would like to interpret the poem. I'm not sure many people would, so safer not to, but that's how I would interpret it. Definitely in the minority, because I can't make sense of it otherwise. It seems much too contradictory, unless she is saying these specific cliche things appeal to her. So you've got to know the person really well, because some cliche generic things won't appeal to them, but then there's other things, like a small amount of cliche generic things, that do appeal to them. So you've got to know the person really well. So that's another potential interpretation. Please do in your personal reflection, tell me what you think, because this one is, really, really fascinating and definitely up for discussion. So, as well as annotating the poems, we're going to be capturing key ideas in our exercise books. What you record will be different for each of you. Choose ideas that you'll feel confident writing about in an exam. Make sure your notes include reference to the speaker and their feelings and perspectives, 3 quotations, literary terminology, points about language and structure, and consideration of key themes. Pause the video for about 10 minutes to do this now. Okay, so this is the important bit, personal reflection. I would like you to have a personal reflection written down in your books. I would like it to be guided by these questions, but if you only focus on one or choose to go off in a different direction, that is fine as well. I want it to be authentic and genuine and almost like a stream of consciousness. So just your kind of thoughts on the poem. Don't censor it. Don't think, do think, but don't overthink it. Just kind of let the ideas flow, because that would give me the best feel for your genuine thoughts on the poem. But like I say, please be guided by these ideas, but don't be limited by them. So, what do you think of the message of the poem? What kind of impact did it have on you? Is it relevant to today's society? And what are your thoughts on the ending? The last question in particular, I would be really interested to hear your thoughts on. So pause the video for 5 to 10 minutes to write your own personal reflection. And remember, that's what you are uploading to me, not your notes. Okay, so I'd like you to spend the last 5 minutes making sure you know the quotations really well. You can do this using any of the methods on the slide. Pause the video now to do this. Okay, and that is the end of today's lesson. So I hope you found it interesting, hope you found it enjoyable, and I'm really looking forward to hearing your thoughts on today's poem. So thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.